Thanks everyone for joining me today for what sounds like a really interesting session. Joining me on this panel is Adam Lucas-Petit, Head of University Partnerships at Password Testing, Adrian Dutch, Director of Global Recruitment and Admissions at the University of Westminster, and Bobby Mehta, Director of Global University of Portsmouth. So today we're talking about, will reforming university assessment provide a gateway to internationalisation? Recent policies and plans in India have indicated that the government wants to open up the Indian higher education sector to greater internationalisation and also open up to the potential of greater diversification in admissions reform, opening up, which offers the potential for this gateway to internationalisation. My first question for the panel today is, from your perspective, how can admissions reform lead to increased internationalisation? Is this a question of improving quality, and how can assessment fit into that? Adrian, would you be happy to start us off with that question?
Yep. So I think one of the first things to consider is obviously why we do admissions and why we might reform admissions. And obviously that is around ensuring that students have the ability to thrive in the institution. So, I think it's important that recruitment itself isn't the driver for reform, but quality is. And by quality, I mean not driven by rankings, but driven by the students' ability to do well and to thrive in the institution. That should be the driver. I think where it helps with recruitment is where you are able to keep things as simple as possible. The minute that you introduce complications as a recruiter, complications are barriers. So the more simple that you can keep things, both in terms of the actual tasks that an individual has to do and in how you communicate it, that then becomes a gateway to recruitment, whether that's international or home as well. And so you certainly see within courses at the universities I've worked for that whenever there's a deviation from, let's say, the standard procedure, that can be seen as a barrier. And so I would say simplicity is key, but the reform itself shouldn't be a driver for recruitment. It should be a driver for ensuring that the students are going to do well at the university.
Ian, thanks. That's really helpful. I wondered if anyone else wanted to hop in on that one. Bobby?
Yeah, I think I agree with Adam, and I think particularly in the Indian context, what universities are looking to do is also to diversify their recruitment and the type of student they have on campus. And that is an important part of what they're trying to do in the Indian universities and on Indian campuses. So I think, the admissions, the selection process and everything that they go through is going to be really an important part of the future plans and what the Indian higher education system will start to look like, and also the student experience on campus. So as Adrian's already said, in terms of the recruitment processes you go through, the admissions processes, those are all really key to ensuring that you maintain the quality of the students, the quality of the classroom experience that then transpires as a result of that. Will all come together based on what your policies and approaches are to assessment, etc. So that is really, really key. And I think that this type of reform will really help the Indian universities in their drive to increase international students coming to study in India. And we've seen the same in the UK. If you look across the UK sector, it was that drive in admissions reforms, the use of testing and different ways and approaches to different qualifications from around the world to ensure that you're getting the best quality students coming to study at UK universities. And I think that that's something that we will see in India as we move forward as well.
That's brilliant. Adam Lucas, do you want to add to that? You're still on mute. Classic.
Hi, that's better, right? Yeah, sorry. I thought the spacebar would do the trick, but not apparently. So yeah, the value I can try and add is by approaching it from the admissions assessment perspective, as that's my background coming from password testing, and especially for international students, if the aim is to internationalize campuses, if English is not the first language of a lot of the students studying, so assessing students pre-arrival not only ensures the quality of the students and make sure they're going to meet the academic requirements and be able to succeed in the courses, as Adrian said, it's also aiding retention as well, and making sure that they're going to be able to stick around long enough to complete the courses. They're not going to fall short and maybe drop out a bit early. Also, the admissions testing also helps identify students that might have some support needs. So it might be that students, among the successful candidates, you might spot students who have great grades, great critical reasoning, but maybe have trouble articulating their ideas or writing an essay in English. So rather than allowing them to struggle, it means that you can identify them from day one, support them through it, which is not only useful in terms of, it's what universities are there to be doing to improving students, but it also means that it's good strategy, because those students are going to then become successful graduates that will then go on to be ambassadors in their own country for your institution, and that will only benefit the international reach and reputation of the universities.
Great, yeah, that additional point about retention is so important. You obviously want your students to not only be high quality, but to stay and thrive at the university. We've got a very UK-based panel here, and as Bobby sort of touched on, there are some good practices that we can learn from that the UK has done to really increase its internationalization. So I wondered, what your thoughts were on how Indian universities can learn from institutional practices to grow student recruitment. We touched on English language testing, but I know lots of UK institutions also have in-house maths testing. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts on that. Bobby, maybe we'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, so I think UK universities have been doing international recruitment for over 20 to 30 years now, very actively. And during that period of time, as Adam's referred to, the way we test using English language testing, such as password and other tests that are out there, has really increased as our understanding of international students has grown, what their needs are, etc. So testing, whether it be for maths, whether it be for English language, whether it's actually understanding the qualifications that they're coming in from. So as you look, and when you look at the Indian context, they're looking at a lot of countries, neighboring countries and countries in Africa, where they're targeting scholarships, etc. Those countries will really come together with different students with different qualifications and different backgrounds. So you've really got to understand the context that your students are coming from, what each individual qualification that they're coming in actually means, how it's equivalent to the Indian qualification. So a lot of the work at UK universities have done over the last 20 to 30 years is that qualification equivalency, understanding exactly what one country's equivalence is to another country's. And some of that will come with time because it takes years and years of equivalency testing to actually map qualifications across to the equivalency that in India. So some of it is actually by bringing students through, saying this is what we think it is, continuously reviewing what the admissions practices are, seeing how students are performing, and then adjusting your entry qualifications accordingly.
Great, yeah, that's really helpful. Adrian, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think the UK has historically always punched above its weight in terms of its international recruitment compared to the size of its country. And so there is a lot of good practice for people to look at. I think if you look over the last 10, 15 years, there's probably quite a lot of bad practice to look at as well. And I think, one of the important things is learning from other people's mistakes as opposed to always going your own way. I think if you look at how Australia tackled international recruitment, they clearly looked very closely at the way the UK did things. I think two of my predecessors at Westminster ended up going out there to work. So there's a bit of poaching going on. Whereas I would argue that the US probably made quite a few of the same mistakes that the UK made. They didn't, look at the history quite so closely, I think, as Australia. And at certain points gone down the wrong paths in terms of things like allying themselves to the private sector, in terms of how they use agents. It's taken them a long time. And if you compare the size of countries, I think they're still some way behind us in terms of international recruitment. So I think it's not just a case of the UK blowing its own trumpet and saying, yeah, just do what we do. I think have a look back at things 10 years ago and look at sometimes where we took the wrong path. Act accordingly.
Great. Just before I go to Adam Lucas, could you expand a little bit on some of those other mistakes that perhaps the UK made that India might want to try and avoid?
Well, I think it's not so much a sector approach, but it's looking at the growth in the market, and it's understanding that what drove that at the time, whereas what might drive that for Indian universities now. I think there was a period that we went through where we were very driven by numbers. I think I'm right in saying Bobby, Adam and myself, we all came up through the recruitment ranks. So it was very much about let's get enrollments, let's get numbers, let's hit target. Whereas I think now we're starting to look much more at quality. That's why we're using things like password and testing to ensure that students are coming in and going to thrive. I think someone who came into the sector, in the last 10 years, I think I always get the impression that this was driven by numbers, and then we saw the benefits of diversity, of having these international students on campus. It wasn't driven by the diversity argument. And as Bobby says, India has the opportunity to look at this much more holistically than maybe we did, and then act accordingly.
Great, thank you. Perfect time to bring Adam Lucas in to get your thoughts on this.
I also think, luckily, India doesn't seem to be as reliant on international tuition fees as some countries are, maybe. So that's to their benefit as well, the fact that they can concentrate on other factors such as diversity and the benefits that will bring to the campuses. And to mention something that Bobby referred to about qualification equivalencies as well, I think so a lot of weightage is given to school leaving marks, but there are so many disparities in curriculums from different countries all over the world, and even regionally within some countries. So what a lot of universities try and do is try and compare candidates within particular disciplines. So one university partner, for example, all the students that come on to study engineering programs with them, if they don't have obvious equivalencies, they will test them all for their maths ability, which enables them to not only offer places to the most appropriate students, those that are going to succeed on the course, but also it allows them to place, based on their ability, the students into streams when they arrive at universities. So it's useful for admissions, but also placement once they arrive there. And as Adrian said about the UK punching above its weight, I think recently the UK's realised that it needs to pull a few more punches out to try and stay where it wants to be, as there are so many other competitors, India being one of them now, drawing international students there instead of potentially to the UK. Also lots of great universities in China and other countries. So one of the things that universities in the UK are trying to do is more proactive conversion activity. So with students applying to probably about 12 different universities, they're trying to contact the students with the correct messaging at the correct times. One other useful conversion activity might be offering them the opportunity to take their in-house testing, as well as sending them away to take standardized tests just helping them get over those barriers to entry rather than leaving them to it on their own. I think students also really appreciate the help from the university in meeting their condition offers sometimes.
Great, thanks. One thing that I know that the Indian government has proposed is this sort of an idea of a standardized aptitude test for international students. I wondered if you thought that that was a particularly useful tool, or is that in-house testing so much more important for universities because they can personally tell the quality of their graduates? Adrian, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So I think I don't have the answer to the question, but I have some questions that might then lead to the answer, if that makes sense. I think that the thing to consider is an additional test an enhancement, or is it another barrier? So there is an advantage, obviously, for the institutions that everybody's coming in doing the same test. But as Bobby, suggested earlier, there's an awful lot of work that we've done with NARIC to do equivalencies that you could just basically utilize as a sector. I think the second thing is that some of my experience of testing, academic testing, is that over time it becomes easy to game that system. So if you look at certain tests that are used, without mentioning names, but for entrance to things like business schools, after a period of time, an industry springs up training people how to succeed on that test. And over time, the test itself then becomes meaningless. And so I think if some kind of standardized testing is brought in, it has to constantly be refreshed. It has to constantly evolve so that that test can't be gamed. And I think the final thing I would just say is where testing is introduced in that way, but it's alongside scholarships, then you have to be very careful that what's driving the take-up of that test is the desire to study in India, as opposed to just the scholarships driving thing forward, because otherwise you will invest an awful lot of resource into dealing with admissions and dealing with applications that are unlikely to convert without a scholarship. So I think I don't have the answer to the question, is standardized testing good? But I think you have to ask a lot of questions about it to ensure you're not just putting a lot of effort into something that may be a barrier and may not be needed in the first place.
Great, that's really helpful. Does anyone else want to come in on that, Bobby?
Yeah, so I agree with Adrian in the sense that having additional testings, having a standardized test approach can definitely be an additional barrier. So it can be, do I want to go and study in India? I have to do an additional test. Whereas if I look at country XYZ, I don't have to do a test. The fact there's a scholarship there as well is it can be an attraction, and there is the downside to that you attract the wrong type of student because they are financially dependent on that scholarship. But also it can attract the best and the brightest. I think with a standardized test, you can definitely get a level playing field because there's a way of testing across a number of countries. So it can almost bypass the need to understand the qualifications that they're coming in with, because you have your test and therefore anybody coming in, if they're hitting a certain benchmark. But as Adrian has said as well, the problem with that type of approach is over time, it becomes a learned thing. People are taught that this is the way you pass the test. So that can decrease the value. However, I think the fact that India is going to be having this standardized testing, the fact that scholarships are there, it's really going to help to put India and the opportunities to study in India on the map. Because if you do create an industry behind it, so if we look at English language testing, people get trained to do English language testing because they want to go and study abroad. So it will help, I think, raise the brand of Study India and the opportunities that are there. And scholarships are really a big attractor. We've seen that with the UK. We've got the well-known Chevening scholarship schemes, the Commonwealth scholarship schemes, etc., where students know that they can get places at UK universities, and there are substantial scholarship offerings there for the brightest and the best candidates. So that type of approach can be really positive, and I think will potentially help to fast track the attractiveness of studying in India.
Great, that's so helpful. Adam, Lucas, did you want to add something?
Yeah, it could be, so that standardized testing could be a good promotional tool in a way to get the ball rolling, to get awareness of India as a study destination and have people thinking that way. But yeah, just to echo what both Adrian and Bobby also said about standardized tests becoming too standardized, so that industries pop up, people are being taught to the test. In fact, there's one university that I remember speaking to who said that their medical school is disproportionately Indonesian, just because they teach so well to the test that more of those students than anywhere else get the top marks, because they just know exactly where to go. And in fact, we've got a university partner who, in terms of English language testing, because some of those tests are so standardized, there are lots of places that will teach you to take a TOEFL, teach you to take an IELTS. And one university based in London tests all their students on arrival to see what their actual level is. And because of all the teaching to the test, they find that usually about 89% have the grades or higher that they are supposed to have. And there's always about 11% who drop a grade, sometimes two, because they've crammed for a test, or they've maybe just been taught how to take that test well. So yeah, definitely there's been, it seems, growing demand for like in-house testing, and generally the pandemic has highlighted some extra gaps in the system. The fact that so many students this year struggled to get places at IELTS test centres, for example, it seemed that universities that told students, go away, get yourself an IELTS and come back to us with your results, they maybe were a detriment because students struggled to get the places. Maybe they became too late and then weren't even able to get visas to come and study, whereas a lot of universities jumped on to investing in in-house testing and were able to say, here, let's help you out. Here's our test that you can take to meet your requirements. So that's, I think, something that students appreciate, and also it benefits the university as well, because that data is owned in-house, and having that data to look at, and it means that students are less able to shop around as well. In a way, they're more committed to your institution, so it also acts as a helpful conversion tool.
Great, that's so helpful. And yeah, I think it was our first mention of the pandemic, which is surprising, but it is important to note the disruption and how universities can continue to support international students despite all that disruption we've had. We've got a few questions coming in on the chat, so I'll put them to you guys now. We've got one from Dr. Irfan Bashir, who says that faculty plays the most important role in assessing students' learning. Reforming assessment needs training of faculty. What will be the ingredients of faculty training to bring and implement reforms in higher education? Does anyone want to jump in there? Adrian, that'd be great.
I think it depends what we're talking about in terms of assessment. If we're talking about assessing candidates to come in, or if we're talking about assessing the students when they're in. I think when we're talking about assessing candidates to come in, particularly at undergraduate level, I would argue that having something that's unified, simple, in the UK, it's NARIC, in India, it might be the new SAT test, actually reduces the burden on academics to look at that. And you know, it is a personal opinion, but I would rather have academics out there teaching than going through admissions processes. So, you know, in the UK, certainly in my university, and probably, you know, most of the sector, most of the decisions are made by admissions teams without necessarily recourse to faculty. It's only when you get to either the very upper echelons or very specific specialized courses that there's a need for a huge amount of academic engagement. That said, those criteria for the courses are dictated by the academics, so it's not like they're divorced from it. But what I'm saying is that the day-to-day grunt work and administration of it falls to professional service staff, so that academics can teach, do research, do the things that they are good at and want to do. So I think it's just, what I'm talking about here is the assessment of candidates as opposed to the assessment of students themselves.
Great, thank you. Adam, Lucas, I can see you want to jump in there.
Oh, just to mention as well that a lot of tests like this, be it password, be it any of the other tests that can be used to assess students for entry, a lot of it will actually save staff time, because much of the marking can be automated, which means they're freed up to focus on classroom time, focus on teaching. They're not sent to test various students and then do all of the marking themselves. And the fact that a lot of it can be done online as well means that the results data that's automated is then available to them online and can be administered anywhere, not even just on campus, which is especially helpful if mobility is hampered.
Great, yeah. Anything that can sort of lessen the burden on teachers, I think, would be welcome in most sectors. Bobby, did you want to add something?
I think just to add, I think from an academic perspective, what we've learned in the UK is we've reached a position where we have admissions professionals, admissions teams, but that's taken a number of years, and it's taken a relationship between academic colleagues and those teams, and putting those entry requirements and admissions processes and ways of assessing applications in place. So it does take some time to get there. It takes a lot of trust and development of processes, understanding of qualifications for you to get to the position the UK is in at the moment, where there's less of a burden on the academic staff. And I think also it's important to learn what we've learned in the UK, that the speed of the admissions process is also very important to international students. So the longer the admissions process takes, if you're making a decision on an admission by committee, that was going to take a lot longer than where you've got a setup where it comes in, you have your set entry requirements, you look at a test result, and you make a decision. Because often international students, because they have to go through visa process, leaving their countries, etc., they often need to have decisions as quickly as possible to make those big decisions about where they want to study and what they do next.
That's great. That's really helpful. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but that's been such a great discussion. I'm sure we could all continue for another half hour, an hour. I found it really fascinating, and I hope that all the audience members enjoyed that and found it useful. Thank you very much to all the panelists. That was great. Thank you.